session of National COE's DACI's SERI conference. We would like to extend a very warm welcome to all our delegates, speakers, researchers, exhibitors, and partners who have joined us here from all over the country and abroad. To begin with today's proceeding, let us join hands in welcoming the respected guest, Major General Manjit Singh, Joint Secretary, Office of National Cybersecurity Coordinate, New Delhi. Now, welcome, sir.
Very good.
Now,
Thank
I
you.
would like to welcome Ms. Danielle Santos, Manager of Communication and Operation, National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, NICE, at National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. Welcome, Danielle. Our next guest is Professor Rajendra Raj, Department of Computer Science, Calisano College of Computing and Information Science, Rochester Institute of Technology. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
We have the esteemed moderator, Mr. Vijay Thadani. He is the Vice Chairman and Managing Director of NIIT Limited, a leading global skills and talent development corporation. Welcome, sir, to CIRI conference and the plenary session. So now, may I request Vijay sir to initiate the discussion on national strategies for cyber education and skill building, need for concerned national action.
Thank you, Thadani. Thank you. First of all, I do want to welcome all the delegates. It's the end of a long day for all of you, and we would therefore like to keep this session as interesting as possible in a conversational format. But it is an important session because this puts perhaps the whole day in a summary form in terms of what are some of the actions going forward in terms of creating a strategic look at this whole cybersecurity space. I'll just make some brief remarks and then I'll hand you over to the panelists for their opening remarks. Just to lay the ground for this, India is fast emerging as a global cybersecurity hub. And I don't think we could have said that 5-6 years ago with as much confidence as we are able to do now. Because while global cybersecurity initiatives have been around for many decades in the country, but I think the current impetus came when NASSCOM and DSCI were commissioned to write a report on the future of cybersecurity industry and how the cybersecurity initiatives in the country should take place by the current Prime Minister as a part of his address to NASSCOM annual session. And I must say that in these last 5 years, the momentum has really built up. Just to share some numbers with you, India today has one of the largest talent pools in the world, if I may dare say, the largest talent pool in cybersecurity in the world, and matching closely with US, which obviously has always been much ahead. A lot of groundwork has been done through some initiatives. One of the primary ones, which has been kind of managed by the government, is ICEA, the Info Security Education and Awareness Program, which has gained a lot of momentum. In addition to that, NASSCOM, of course, has been at the forefront. NASSCOM, which is the industry body, Sector Skills Council, which is focused on creating certified cybersecurity professionals, Cyber Shiksha, which is a DSCI and Microsoft-based initiative, and quite recently the Future Skills Initiative, which has been also a very, very strong initiative under the NASSCOM body. And I think we heard Amit Agarwal this afternoon. In addition to that, or as laid out by them, schools have begun to now, K-12 schools have begun to integrate their curricula and have cybersecurity as a subject. many universities and colleges have adopted cybersecurity as a part of the curriculum. And that is what has led to the 150,000 odd strong talent pool that which we are talking of. I also come from a university, NIIT University, where we took up cybersecurity as a very important initiative. In fact, we run a master's program in cybersecurity, which has always had some special interest from the industry. We in the bachelor's program, we offer it as electives as well as specialization under all programs, whether they are technology or management or any other program that we lead. And in fact, the very first startup which gained prominence, which came out of the university, there have been many startups since then, has been in a product to do with cybersecurity, and we are very proud of that startup because it's also the Prime Minister's award winner for for excellence in product engineering. Now, so many of these initiatives are good, but they have not caused yet enough momentum because there are five forces which are actually driving the cybersecurity initiatives in the industry, which require much more on the larger talent pool. One is the growth of the cyber security services industry itself, which has employing, I said, about 130,000 odd people, and cybersecurity has been termed as the third largest growth area after AI and cloud computing. The second is the global capability centers, which multinational corporations are setting up in India, more than 2,000 of them nearly now, and many of them have cybersecurity as the area of R&D and product engineering work, as well as cybersecurity services for their own group. 8 of the 15 top cybersecurity product companies have their R&D centers now in India. The Indian startup ecosystem is very vibrant with more than 235 startups when it was last counted. I'm sure a couple of dozen more would have got added in the last 3 or 4 months, as my data suggests. In addition to that, I think from a national security perspective, cybersecurity has gained much more prominence with many dynamics which are happening in the national and the international, should I say, relations area. And lastly, in the last 8 months, I think cybersecurity has now reached the common man because making sure that the digitized economy which we are now living in, where just about everything is happening through the digital economy, securing the digital economy in addition to making it available is a very key imperative, and many people have been on the wrong side of that, not having followed some basic precautions. So I think the spread of digitization has also thrown up another challenge, that instead of needed by a few industries and a few cities, now the cybersecurity awareness has to reach to, I would say, the last mile within the nation. And I'm sure General Manjeet Singh is faced with this from day in, day out onwards. So without further ado, I would right now say that given these five forces and multiple initiatives, if we had to provide acceleration, how should we be going forward, and what is the global experience in that is what we are here to discuss. And this session will indeed be successful if we have a few takeaways which the Indian policymakers, Indian industry, DSCI and others could adopt, because then I think we would be able to contribute that hour that we have spent together very effectively. So with that, I would first hand you over to get a sense of what the Indian government initiatives are, which of course is a major force as far as the cybersecurity thought leadership is concerned. So I'll hand you over to General Manjeet Singh, who would first talk to us about the Indian initiatives, and then I will hand over the podium to the other two. Thank you.
Thank you. Jai Hind, my fellow panelists, Professor Raj, Ms. Danielle, and Mr. Thadani, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me thank DSCI and especially Ms. Rama and Mr. Godse for organizing this very interesting conference on an issue so very relevant in the contemporary cyber environment of today. Also, Ms. Shravani for all the coordination work. Before I dwell into the national strategies for cyber education and skill building per se, I think a brief on the NCSS 2020, that is the National Cybersecurity Strategy 2020, which we are coming out with, maybe in order, a very brief one. For the last about a year plus, we have been working on the National Cybersecurity Strategy, the drafting of that. In fact, you are all aware that we have the National Cybersecurity Policy of 2013 in place, and while we have made a fair amount of progress, when we were analyzing that, we found that there are certain gaps, especially with respect to the changing technological landscape, the changing threat landscape, certain shortcomings in the action orientation, the exact roles and responsibilities, the roadmaps. So we felt that we need now the National Cybersecurity Strategy in line with the global environment, in line with the other nations who are going in for these strategies. So we have made that endeavor, and as you would recall, on the eve of, on the occasion of the Independence Day, our Honorable Prime Minister had announced that the strategy would soon be in front of everyone. And the strategy is now in the final stages of approval. It's the complete homework and everything has been done. So while I don't intend to go into the exact contours of the National Cybersecurity Strategy per se completely because of the paucity of time, I would focus on the education, awareness, and the skill development pillar today. If you see even today's paper, the kind of concern in today's paper, Hindustan Times, Anisha Datta has covered the railway troubleshooters to help fight cybersecurity breaches, and it talks about how the PM has shown concern in the number of breaches and attacks, and therefore the training of cybersecurity personnel is completely on his mind, and he's given his push himself that every ministry, every department forms a nucleus of people who get adequate training on the cyber security, forms a nucleus, train other people, so that at every organization, every ministry, every department, you have a fair amount of talent available. And we have already started this activity. The people are going through various programs which the MIIT is going to steer in terms of the basic courses and the advanced courses, and we will be able to develop that capability in the ministries. That is just one initiative straight from our Honorable Prime Minister, and there are many more such initiatives. Some of them have been covered by Mr. Thadani initially. As far as the strategy is concerned, we have taken a whole of nation approach, and therefore, who is the stakeholder? The stakeholder is every citizen of this country, all the businesses and the government. And the vision for the strategy is to provide or to ensure a safe, secure, vibrant, dynamic cyberspace for the nation's prosperity. The underlying the nation's prosperity, the social well-being, the economic well-being of the country using the cyberspace. So we have to have a cyber posture which is viable, which is trustworthy, which is used by every citizen, every business, and the government alike in an absolute secure manner. So that is the approach. Overall, the approach is the whole of nations approach. And when you talk of that, the cyber education and skill development are the basic pillars in shaping the cyber future of any country. So be it us or anyone else. So if we go into the National Cybersecurity Policy of 2013, we had earmarked certain numbers to be trained by a specific time frame. However, we find, though Mr. Thadani said that we have a large talent pool as far as the HR is concerned, but I feel uh, India is a powerhouse in terms of the IT professionals and the ITS. We have 55% of the global market share as far as ITS is concerned. But I think we need more focused cybersecurity professionals. And these so we have a HR talent. There's no doubt of that. But we need to reskill them. We need to orient them towards the cybersecurity jobs. Now, these cybersecurity jobs are also market-driven jobs. Who needs them? The market needs it. The government needs it. The business needs it. Every citizen, in fact, needs it. But when we go into the advanced cybersecurity professionals, that is where I think we need to put more focus on, and therefore the two major areas where we need to build indigenous capacities and capabilities to the extent possible is in terms of the technologies and the manpower. And the man behind the machine will always remain supreme. That's what I firmly believe. And therefore, the importance of the HR, the importance of the basic awareness, education, and skill development. So there is a strong realization that education and awareness in the cyber domain is vital for the personal safety, the security of all, and it's the key to a productive and efficient workforce in industry, academia, and the government. And therefore, the strategy in this direction is to develop a strong ecosystem for cyber education, awareness, and skill development in the country. Now, that is what we want. That's our main strategy, or that's our main objective of our strategy. And the targets are every citizen, all businesses, and the government. And talking about the specific strategies, with that as the basic objective, we have about 10, 12 strategies. We can call them strategies, we can call them as initiatives on which we have envisioned those initiatives, and I'm sure the time horizon for the strategy we've kept is as 5 years, and we hope that with everyone's close coordination and collaboration, we should be able to make headway in each of those 10 to 12 strategies that we have envisioned for ourselves. Just to talk of some of the major ones, starting with the awareness. The awareness is the key, and in order to promote safe and responsible cyber hygiene amongst citizens, Cyber Gyan campaign has been envisioned. When I say Gyan, it is knowledge, basic education, basic knowledge, and simple and basic cybersecurity advice, norms of cyber behavior, and benefits of using secure e-services would be disseminated through all popular media. This has been given to certain ministries to steer this. We have a full action-oriented or action plan supporting each of these strategies with earmarked responsibilities, timelines, the nodal agencies, the lead agencies, and the expected outcomes. Now, that's another document which will be a accompanying document to the NCSS 2020. And though that will be for some limited circulation, the strategy will be in the public domain, and the action plan would go to the stakeholders only. Now, so that's the basic on that. And if we talk of at the institutional level, we are responsible for producing sufficient skilled manpower for the country. And therefore, a prerequisite to that is the requirement to conduct a comprehensive analysis of requirements of various sectors and the likely avenues of application of manpower. Now, that is something that mapping is very important. Otherwise, we may go haywire. We would also require to study the required capability and capacity building, update the knowledge base, and build suitable certification programs that are accepted globally. That while we have a whole lot of certification programs across the globe, we are also looking at certain certification programs within the country specific to our needs. That is what we envisage. And therefore, in order to strengthen the cyber education ecosystem of our country, we have envisioned to incorporate cyber security education and awareness in the school curriculum, starting from the primary school level, especially focusing on the individual cyber hygiene and safety. We have also envisioned having a cyber wellness council at the school level. That is for the purpose of advisory role, the counseling to the students, because the kind of exposure today the young children have is tremendous. And therefore, we've thought about a cyber wellness council at every school who should be able to give advice. Now, cybersecurity scheme of courses would also be started throughout the country at undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate level in colleges. And in order to encourage the younger generations to take up the cybersecurity, these courses would have scholarships and incentives. That is what we have envisioned this. Now, further, due to the growing incidents of cyber crimes and other cyber attacks, the requirement of legal professionals proficient in info security and cyber laws is phenomenal. And hence, in order to meet this demand, cyber law focused courses would be introduced in the law universities for undergraduate and graduate level courses. Now, the next issue is on incentivizing the R&D. The NCSS envisions incentivizing students in order to encourage them to undertake research in the arena of cybersecurity and foster R&D and technology collaborations in academic institutes globally. Now, at the national level, we have certain programs. To start with, we have a national campaign called National Cyber Saksham. We can call it cyber enabled, cyber capable, cyber competent in English to translate the word Saksham, to assess the requirements and market demand in human resources, develop best practices to skill, recruit, and retain professionals, and to structure the key employment-based areas into operational skills for large enterprises, industry, government, and R&D. Those are the areas we are looking at specifically. On the certification programs, as I talked about earlier, they are very necessary for identification and validation of the skilled manpower in the cyber domain, and therefore a number of cyber programs we are envisaging to have to meet our domestic needs, as also they should be able to they should be recognized the world over.
May I say that we will handle some of this in the follow-up part, and if you could just wrap up. So that
yes. So one or two more initiatives, and then as we go along through the question and answers, we can talk about the rest. Right. Maybe the last point could be that we have also envisioned to build a national cyber security skill registry. On the lines of Tech Saga, we already have a technology repository done by DSCI only, the Tech Saga, and in a similar manner, we want to build this kind of a registry so that the professionals in the country, along with the specific skill sets, people can see and who wants to employ them and who are in the need, and all this to be done in the best of the cybersecurity posture of the country. The rest we'll take on as we go along through the questions and answer. That's all from myself.
Thank you, General Manjeet Singh. I'm sorry I had to interrupt, though I know what took you so long and which is such a rich initiative. To say it in 8-10 minutes, I can understand the challenge. So my apologies. Not at all. There will be opportunity to discuss more. Okay, with that, may I request Professor Raj to share with us the experience. He comes with a very in-depth background, having been involved from early capacity creation onwards, now to the ABET accreditation in formal educational institutions. And I'm sure that he would have strong perspectives to share. So I would request him to please share his remarks. Thank you. You are on mute.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. I will take a quick, historical perspective on the U.S. end of cybersecurity education based on my direct involvement and experiences with cybersecurity education. There is one part of this that I will not touch upon, and this is the part that Danielle will cover, and that is to do with NICE. So please keep that in mind. So if you imagine, 9/11 had a dramatic impact on the US. But even before 9/11, the US was big, attempting to build up its capability in cybersecurity. And if you haven't already read these books, I would strongly urge you to read books by Richard Clarke. So he's written some excellent books, that'll give the background. So anyway, after 9/11, it became crucial for many universities in the US to appreciate the importance of cybersecurity, and they ended up creating a whole bunch of master's programs. And I, helped to create the one at RIT by developing courses in data security and privacy and secure coding, because that was really my background. So, in terms of early capacity, if you imagine the world of the US back in the 1990s, the late 1990s, there wasn't much cybersecurity education. And so, to fill into this void, the NSA, the National Security Agency, began a designation program for universities called the Centers for Academic Excellence, which seemed to be very similar to the NCOE. And originally they were called the Information Assurance Education. Now they're called Cyber Defense. They also have something called Cyber Operations Designations, but that is really meant primarily for graduates that end up working for the US military or intelligence agencies. So they created an incentive for many US universities to get this designation. And for this, the universities had to show coverage of cybersecurity topics, a wide range of cybersecurity topics. And this was really the first attempt to get cybersecurity education into the US university space. The NSA also did something, and I'm glad to hear, what the previous two speakers mentioned. This is entry into the kindergarten to the 12th grade high school space, and this is through the Gent Cyber Camps. And this is really a way for students to understand things like cyber hygiene, as well as get into more details about actual cybersecurity, so that you're really training the next generation, getting them passionately interested in this field. And at the same time, the National Science Foundation focused on research. And I can tell you this, a lot of people in academia, especially the prestigious universities like the IITs, really need a little more, let's say, I don't want to use the bribe, but they really need some incentive, okay, to get into research, in cybersecurity. And so the National Science Foundation created a bunch of programs, including the prestigious Cyber Core Scholarship Program and this Security and Cyberspace Initiative to get faculty interested in both research and teaching. So things today are dramatically different than they were 25 years ago. And I think that's because of all these early efforts. Now, to moving on to curriculum. Okay, so noticing this need about 10, maybe years ago, a lot of professional societies in computing, namely the ACM, the IEEE Computer Society, IFEP, and the AIS, that's the Association for Information Systems Education, they got together and created a joint task force on cybersecurity education. And eventually in 2017, they released a curricular guidelines for cybersecurity education at the undergraduate level. And based on this, ABET, with which I am involved, created accreditation criteria for undergraduate degree programs in cybersecurity. And these tend to be comprehensive both in breadth and in depth. So you really want undergraduate, degrees to cover the whole gamut of the spectrum, okay, from data security, software security, component security, connection security, system security, human security, organizational security, and societal security. The last three are way beyond just computing because they impact, things like public policy and the general, society at large. And so the ABET criteria get into all of these things, and to get an ABET accredited degree, you have to, meet, most of these kinds of things. And the other thing ABET did really for computing programs is to say security is important. And so starting about 4 years ago, all ABET computing programs, whether it's computer science, information systems, or information technology, okay, require some degree of coverage of principles of security. So principles and practices of security. And to date, there are about 18 degree programs, 17 of them in the US, one in Saudi Arabia, that has been accredited under as a cybersecurity bachelor's degree program. And this is pretty good considering this really started only in 2018. And there are several more to be accredited this year, hopefully. So, in terms of lessons learned and recommendations, there is really a need for high and consistent standards in cybersecurity education. So in the US, we really have three, major ones: the ACM ABET cybersecurity guidelines, the NSA in terms of its designation criteria for the Centers for Academic Excellence in Cyber Defense, and then of course NICE that Daniel's going to speak about. And one of the ways of maintaining quality is to have regular reaccreditation and redesignation programs. And this is what ABET and the NSA do. So you cannot say we are done and we are forever, we know cybersecurity education. So there is a period of time when you have to keep, and I think in the case of the NSA, you have to annually report. In the case of ABET, it's either 2 years or 6 years, depending on how your previous visit turned out. So I think just to finish up, you have to encourage cybersecurity education at all levels, from the school level, even from elementary school, all the way up to the doctoral levels. And research should be encouraged at all the top institutions. So I think I'll stop here.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we will go through a round of questions. I did see 2 or 3 interesting points, some of which were consistent with what General Manjeet Singh said, and some things are things to be further thought about, which I'm sure we will get into. Now, I kept the NICE thing for the end, and that is the NICE program, which is gained a lot of prominence in the world. It's the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education in the United States, and we are indeed fortunate to have Danielle Santos to speak to us. So, Danielle, over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me at this conference today. I know it's the last session of the day, so thank you to the audience as well for listening into this session. So the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, or NICE, we're a small office of, I think we have 6 staff members now, but we really see ourselves as a bigger community effort. Our small office is helping to coordinate what we call a community effort. And that's what we really think NICE is. It's this community, bigger, broader effort of other government organizations, industry organizations, and academic coming together to help build an ecosystem around cybersecurity education, training, and workforce development. One of the things that I wanted to mention on today is when we talk about strategy and how we can think about the different programs and initiatives. In the U.S. here, we have, the U.S. has a national cybersecurity strategy, one of which pillars is focused on education and awareness for cybersecurity. In that strategy, there is a call out to having a national coordinated effort, which is really where NICE comes into play. And then here at NICE, we actually have an additional strategy that goes into deeper detail on how we are going to approach cybersecurity education and workforce. One of the main goals in our NICE strategy is actually focused on expanding the use of the workforce frameworks for cybersecurity. So that's one of the main things I wanted to focus on today is this workforce framework, and we refer to it as the NICE framework, so you may have heard of it before, but it really provides a common taxonomy, a common way of describing cybersecurity work so that we can start connecting the dots between the students who are learning about cybersecurity, the people who maybe, as was mentioned earlier, they're in a traditional IT area, but they want to pivot their skills and get into a cybersecurity career. So maybe they're a job seeker in cybersecurity. And then also the industry side, the employers of cybersecurity, and connecting those three stages, if you will, to better create the pipelines for filling the cybersecurity jobs. The NICE framework at its core uses a notion of building blocks to describe cybersecurity work. So it has at the base tasks, knowledge, and skills levels of what cybersecurity work looks like. From there, it creates those tasks and put them together into work roles in cybersecurity. And work roles can be anything from secure software developer to cybersecurity threat analyst. It can be other things that are not traditionally the technical fields, such as a cybersecurity curriculum developer. It could be roles in the C-suite area, such as an operator or a manager level. And these work roles, if we look above the work roles, they're grouped into areas that make sense for creating cybersecurity teams. So if we're thinking about a cybersecurity networking team, what kinds of roles does that team need to have to be effective? So this framework is really the core of a lot of things we do at NICE and a lot of our efforts. As was mentioned earlier, the education is really critical for all levels of education, starting at very young ages to even our current workforce, trying to figure out how we are maintaining the skills of people who are already employed in cybersecurity and making sure that we're keeping those skills up to date in our own workforces to be most effective. I know we don't have too much time for talking about programs here, and I want to get into the dialogue with the other panelists, but there are maybe two other things that I want to mention. First is just creating those pipelines and pathways to really getting what we call the talent into the demand side, so filling those jobs. There are a few recent programs that I want to highlight that we've seen are able to do that more effectively. So things like apprenticeship programs for cybersecurity. Apprenticeships have long been used for other kinds of careers to help a person build skills while they're learning, but also have a job at the same time. So we've seen apprenticeships in cybersecurity specifically be effective, and these are where employers can sign on current students so that they are employed at an organization. They're getting paid. It's a job and a full-time employment, but at the same time they're able to be going to usually it's a community college where they can be taking courses and learning the skills that they need for the job while they're getting at the actual hands-on experience for the job. And this is a great way for the academic side to pair up with the industry side and create those ways for students to get into the jobs. I'm not sure if Raj went into deep detail here, but our National Science Foundation has also created a scholarship program that's been around for a while, and this program specifically helps feed the government employment side where there are scholarships for students who are studying cybersecurity to be able to get a full ride tuition covered, but in return they do a service term with the government. So that's another great way. We've seen industry pick up these kinds of scholarships as well. So one recent one is the Cyber Talent Initiative, and big companies, MasterCard, I'm not recalling the other companies off the top of my head, but big companies here have signed on to fund students. In this specific program, they actually go work for the government for a year or two, I think it is, and then once they transfer to the MasterCard, for instance, they get loan assistance to repay their student loans. So there are some really great programs here to connect academia with industry. The last thing I wanted to mention today is how do we get all this done? So there are a lot of different programs, and a lot of it is not us. It's not NICE. It's not the staff that we have. It's really, again, that broader community who are doing this great work, and we are just trying to connect the groups together and encourage them to do more. So we have annual conferences where we bring together people who are specifically focused in trying to figure out education and workforce development. We have an annual effort to create career awareness in cybersecurity. So I think most are familiar with October National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, where we're kind of thinking about the at a base level, the safety online and staying safe online. But we kind of take that a step further and have a week where we're focused on career awareness, where it's basically we create materials that people can voluntarily use and take and put up a poster in their hallway or their offices at work. They can take tweets and share out information on how to get into a cybersecurity job, or create their own event or webinar where they're sharing what they do in a day as a cybersecurity worker. So again, these are all things that other people are doing. We have public working groups where they're really led by academia and industry, and they discuss topics like collegiate education, competitions as a way to build skills in cybersecurity, K-12 education, training and certifications is a big one. So figuring out how we can figure out what training and certifications work best for what kinds of cybersecurity work roles. And so really, I just wanted to leave on that note of it's a community effort. We rely on others and the great work that other people are already doing to elevate that and build upon what they've already done. So I'll turn it back over to you, Vijay, for maybe getting into some of the panel questions.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly.
Thank
We'll get into that. Thank you very much. I just had one comment to make. NICE is a very nice acronym to have, but you have to be careful in its usage. You did mention this program is not nice, so I'm sure they were all nice programs in English word nice. So I decided I'll make a mental note of that when we use an acronym of this kind. Anyway, thank you very much. I think what is amazing is that it's a small group which is able to cause coordinated action. I think that is something which is worth looking at. Okay, before I open it to the audience and ask them to post their questions, which Shravani may have got some already, but there were two or three things which are coming to my mind, and each of you can comment on that. One is what I noticed the consistent theme which came out of that is that it's not cybersecurity initiatives are not something which you create once, or an educational program or a skill program which you create first, but like Raj said, it is something which you have to create current and consistent and of highest quality. So if we could just talk a little bit about what are some of our experiences, and General Singh, you may like to say how is it built into the NCSS as well? How will we keep it consistent and clear? And I think consistent as well as current, I think is something which will be useful to know. Some one or two pointers, if all of you can take. Whoever wants to go first.
Since the others are in mute, I'll go first.
Yes, you said it first, so you might as well.
I think the problem that I have noticed, okay, and I think other people have noticed really is when there are no standards, everybody claims that they are doing the correct thing. So across the US, especially at our community colleges, even at our bachelor's and master's levels, you see people getting degrees in cybersecurity, but one degree in cybersecurity and another degree, or one certificate in cybersecurity and another certificate, there's no consistency. Okay, and I think some of these efforts, the NICE, the NSA's designation, ABET's efforts, they're trying to get more consistency so that if you say that you have a degree in cybersecurity, say a bachelor's degree, then everybody understands what that means. And I think that consistency, okay, initially was lacking. Now it's getting a little more because the NSA in their CAE program have started insisting on certain topics to be covered in a degree program. And of course, the same thing with ABET. You have to have those I mean, I gave you the whole breadth from data security to human security. All of those things have to be covered. Okay, now the emphasis can be different, but when you get a graduate from those, any of those ABET programs, they understand at least the foundations of all of those 8 knowledge areas. The knowledge areas defined by the NSA program are slightly different. They overlap in many respects, sometimes they don't. But again, if you get somebody graduating from an NSA CAE program, then you're going to get some degree of consistency across whichever of those 300 institutions.
Okay.
I was going to chime in. That's where I think something like the NICE framework, and maybe it's not the NICE framework that's being used, but another type of cybersecurity skills framework can really help come into play. Creating that model of consistent ways that we're talking about what cybersecurity work is, so that the trainers, educators, and credential providers, they can be modeling their curriculum to certain roles or certain areas, so that when they're producing the talent, the people who are going to hire that talent know exactly what they're getting, because they've seen the curriculum that they've used that teaches to certain points. So I think that helps create, again, connect the dots and make that consistent way of talking about the work, so that we're all working towards the same thing.
Okay. Janal Singh?
So the major issue as far as maintaining the consistency is that one should look at the complete ecosystem as such. Let's say you have a triad of the government, industry, academia. So there has to be a very close feedback mechanism and application of the mid-course correction of the what is actually the need, what specific needs are there. Let's say there are 2 ministries. One is a Ministry of Education, and there is another ministry, say Ministry of IT and Cybersecurity, for example. What Ministry of Education is doing in its school curriculum or the college curriculum or the university curriculum, and what there are programs being run by the Ministry of Electronics and IT, say, they have to match with each other. While he is taking on a advanced level course, but you find that the foundation course has not been taught in as per the Ministry of Education program. So all this has to actually enmesh. they have to enmesh into the complete ecosystem. So we have to have government, industry, academia's tried having a close enmeshed loop with a good feedback mechanism to make it consistent. That's what I.
Okay. So actually, that leads me to another question. There are educational programs being planned and large curricula. There are research actions which are happening. There are people going on their own steam. I thought in US you had a very coordinated system, but like any other society, I guess there would be a large number of initiatives. How do we make sure that we all keep them focused in one direction of making sure they are consistent with, let us say, the plan that we have, the NCSS strategy framework that we have, and how do we make sure that everything that we do remains consistent with that? How do we drive that? So, if Jaran Singh, I'll just ask our US colleagues to comment on that, and then I'll come back to you.
So maybe I'll ask a question of Danielle. How do you keep the NICE curriculum consistent with the NSA curriculum?
So I don't know if let me make a comment first and see if that answers your question. But I think that's always a tough thing to try to make happen, is all of the efforts being coordinated. I can say that there are definitely things that are helpful to being able to do that. Last year, May, so almost 2 years now, there was an executive order that came out on America's cybersecurity workforce, and in it referenced using the NICE framework to help create coordinated efforts. So it talked about encouraging the private sector and academia to voluntarily adopt the framework. The government is required to use it in some cases for measuring their cybersecurity workers or workforce, as well as government contractors are now required to use it. So having executive orders or national strategies that describe how a framework or a certain effort can be referenced to create these other efforts, I think helps, because then again, we're all kind of speaking the same language. We're all thinking about cybersecurity jobs and workforce in the same way, so it helps create those commonalities. The other things that I think are helpful are, again, those just large working groups and forums for people to get together and discuss, to the general's comments about that closed loop and making sure that everyone is speaking with each other. It's helpful for some kind of organization to just be the convener, the person that is going to be able to create the different forums for folks to get together and talk. Raj, I don't know if that answers the question about the curriculum, but
I think that does.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, the other thing that happens, at least from my perspective, which is that when the NICE annual conference is held, the NSA also holds a simultaneous at the NICE conference. So there's a lot of interaction between the people who attend. So there's integration at that level of just talking to each other.
So I think in India, perhaps we are blessed. We have a cybersecurity coordination agency, which anyway is perhaps going to be the nodal point, isn't it? You are on silent, Janal Singh.
Yeah. So very well said. As far as Daniel's point regarding the convener is concerned, we already have a National Cybersecurity Coordinator's Office, which takes care of all such requirements. And in fact, we are wanting a larger apex organization with the additional responsibilities, accountability, authority, including some of the regulation part of it. We are wanting to upgrade that. How it shapes up and all that, I can't comment at the moment. But that's a very important area. The second issue which I covered earlier was also in terms of the cyber skill registry, cyber security skill registry. That also gives you at a your database is updated, and you can make it consistent. Otherwise you are operating in silos. So if we have a national repository of this kind, this also gives you a common platform, a common repository to bank on, and you can match the capabilities, the skills required, the job opportunities or the job requirements. All that can be made consistent if we do it well. So, and similarly, what was said about the cybersecurity week or the conferences and the workshops, through that also you have, you keep meeting, you match those requirements and take it forward. So, I
Yeah,
think.
and if I would add to that, I think while from a government initiative point of view, the Office of the Cybersecurity Coordinator is important, but even from an industry point of view, I think our industry has been forward enough to look at something like DSCI, which is a very strong initiative. And I would encourage Raj and Danielle, both of you, to and maybe Shravani will send you some materials as well. There will be a great opportunity for us because you referred to a community effort. I think there is a larger global community effort that we could all be part of as we go forward on this initiative. There are a few questions which have come from the audience. And just to be mindful of time, we are 8 minutes from close. So just to be just to mention to you, so if we can keep our remarks brief. What one question which has come up is education also needs a number of trained educators. So trainers and teachers. How do we make sure that we build a sufficient pool of that, because that always remains a challenge. And that's, I mean, let me give you both the questions. And how do you encourage or collaboration? Of course, within US, NICE is a coordination framework, so I get the point. And ABET is another place where universities will be able to share their their experiences. But how do you build collaboration across universities, let's say in other countries? It could be US, Europe, Australia, India, I don't know. So how would you go about that? So two-part question. If we can keep our responses brief, please.
I defer to Raj on many of those topics, just because I think he'll be more familiar with that space. But one of the things I have seen as far as coordination across countries in academic settings is through competition, cybersecurity competitions. There are a few global international cybersecurity competitions for collegiate students, and I think that's a neat way to collaborate on first the training aspect, because I know for a lot of these they do boot camps prior to the competition, different rounds of getting the students prepared, and then it's fun to see the teams get together and coordinate. So that's one example.
Okay, Raj.
Yeah, so within the US, okay, and this cannot be replicated outside the US, by its very nature, the National Security Agency gets all those 300 odd designated, institutions together at some form or the other, either on an annual basis or whenever they come up for renewal. And they have, I think each university that goes up for renewing has to get feedback from other universities. They have mentoring programs and so on. So there's a lot more give and take. So obviously that cannot be replicated outside the US. But then you actually look at professional societies. So, for example, the ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery, That is a fairly large international society. So is the IEEE Computer Society, then IFIP. Those are fairly large, and they, do have conferences where people can get together. So, for example, a few years ago, I tried to organize a global perspectives on cybersecurity education working group in one of the conferences organized through ACM. I, I won't name names, but I found it very difficult to attract anybody from India at the time. And I approached a couple of very prestigious universities in India, and nobody was really interested because cybersecurity wasn't something that they thought of as education. They thought of it as research at the time. This was a few years ago. And I'm glad to hear what both of you have said, General Singh and, Mr. Thadani, that things are very different 3 years later.
They are.
So I think if you have to make use of conferences that span countries and get things like these working groups and global perspectives on cybersecurity education, because I would say
touch on the educators part, the teachers and trainers?
Oh yeah, the other question that you had really was, I think, training the trainer or training the educator. I mean, you can really have, you can organize. I just want to say, whenever the long break is, get together, sponsor, especially educators from all, from across India to come to this, and then you organize experts who can come and teach. Okay, and I think, obviously getting Indian experts would be the best thing to do for people who have already established certificates or degree programs.
Okay. Okay, so we are nearing the end. So I would just like, oh, sorry. Yeah, General Singh, go ahead.
So just to add a bit more in terms of the facilities or the infrastructure or the labs available, we have the National Knowledge Network. We feel, or what we think is that, let's say you have a national cyber range, which is hosted on the National Knowledge Network. The National Knowledge Network is everywhere. And that's the range. You can have a single, or you can have a national cyber range for IT, OT, CT separately. And that could become your basic, framework for training the trainer or for training anyone, and also undertaking the R&D through the same cyber range.
Excellent, excellent. So I think we would have to wrap up very, very soon. But I did have one question. When with so many flowers blooming, how do you figure out whether it is indeed, is the needle moving? Is there a focused in all these initiatives? If the needle was to move to build a talent readiness for needs of the future, how do you measure that in US in various frameworks, both in quality and quantity? Quantity may be easy, saying so many professionals, but by the time I finished saying professionals, General Singh was quick to add that yes, but not enough advanced cybersecurity professionals. So obviously both quality as well as quantity is important.
So one of the ways we look at the quantity piece is through CyberSeek. Cyberseek.org is a tool that we've helped fund that provides a data map of how many jobs are currently open in cybersecurity versus how many people are prepared to fill those jobs. And it's been interesting watching the data on that map across the past few years, because while we've seen an expected increase in how many jobs there are available, we've also seen an increase in the amount of people who can fill those jobs. So we're not quite caught up on being fully at capacity with being able to fill all the jobs, but it's encouraging to see that we are increasing the amount of people who can. In regards to quality, that's an interesting question, and one of the things that in the past few years that I've seen is assessments have come up as a way to measure that. More and more people are interested in assessments for both measuring how much students are learning, as well as how much someone knows before they're going to get hired for a job. So creating those ways to measure what someone actually knows and what they can do in practice.
Okay.
So I think to add to that, I just want to say a couple of things. The US does maintain a database where all universities report on how many people graduated with what degrees. And that is something that can constantly, can be checked to see whether the number of graduates is increasing or not or whatever. And the other thing is, if you have, say, an ABET accredited program, ABET has certain things called the learning outcomes for the program, the student outcomes, and the student outcomes are framed around what students are expected to know the day they graduate. And so those things are constantly assessed, and there needs to be a continuous improvement process tied in with that. So every 6 years that gets reviewed by an external team. So that way we are ensuring that the quality is being maintained. And obviously with curricular changes. I do want to add one last thing, from my part, really is, there are bodies of knowledge in cybersecurity now. This wasn't the case 20 years ago. So if you actually look at the three major ones in the US, the NICE framework, the NSA designation program, as well as the ACM curricular guidelines, the CSEC 2017. So you can actually see somebody, rather not somebody, many people have actually put together what they think is the body of knowledge for cybersecurity. And so that's an easier target to aim for than what the US had to do 15 years ago.
Okay, thanks. Janil Singh, any?
Yeah, maybe one or 2 points I can add is just to take it forward from where Professor Raj has left. That listen, how many people did certification, or how many people graduated? We also need to measure as to how many got absorbed into the right kind of job. Maybe that could be a measurement. The second example could be that if some PhD scholars or any R&D entrepreneurs have undertaken R&D efforts, how many IPs got created, how many patents got created, how many products got created out of it. So those could be measurable. So there are a number of actually factors. We can make a complete matrix of that, and that will give us measurable outcomes or the expected outcomes. And then that's the way we can probably do a quantification model on that.
Okay. I know we were discussing a very vast subject, and given your expertise and deep experience in these areas, we were not able to do justice through time. And I think there would be a need for a further dialogue. But right now, I would just like to summarize that it was a very interesting thought to hear that we need a current and consistent practices. We need to be able to measure ourselves, and we need to leverage the body of knowledge which exists elsewhere. And I'm sure within a period of time, through the practices that Janil Singh, you enumerated in NCSS, there would be practices that we would be able to share. And I think from Danielle, what I took away, this whole NICE framework with a handful of people, not even both handfuls, but just about a single handful of people, to be able to create a coordinated effort, which is talked about a lot in the world, I think is indeed something very, very commendable. So lots to learn, and there are many more takeaways which Shravani has been very patiently noting, and I'm sure she will circulate them back to us. But sufficient to say, I enjoyed speaking to you. I learned a lot from you. I had a couple of other questions, and there were a few more, but then we have to finish it within the time that we said we would finish it in. So without further ado, I just would like to thank each one of you, and also thank Shravani for leading us through this journey, and thank DSCI for giving us an opportunity to be together. So good night, good morning, wherever you are, whatever you are doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining.